You've spoken with the king. Have you spoken with the king, and how did it go?
I had a conversation with His Majesty just earlier today, because obviously things will be very busy on Saturday for the coronation. We talked about Indigenous reconciliation, which is a priority of his. He'll be meeting with the Governor General and the heads of the NIOs tomorrow in London. We also talked about the environment, the economy, all a range of things as is right.
On the gun bill, Police se souvient
sur l'ingérence dans les élections, encore de la crédibilité à vos yeux. Si on considère ce qu'on a appris hier, ce rapport du CRS qui est arrivé à M. Chong, quelle crédibilité accordez-vous aujourd'hui à ce rapport de M. Rosen?
Elle est très crédible.
On Police se souvient, on the gun bill and the watering down of the amendments that your government did yesterday, Police se souvient says you won't be invited to the next memorial in Montreal in December. I mean, how did it go so far that you were making promises that you couldn't keep to victims of gun violence, and now you're being uninvited to the memorial?
Canadians have a clear choice in the next election between a party that has done significant things to strengthen gun control and will continue to do more, and a party that wants to form government that wants to weaken gun control. That's what it comes down to.
So how are you being called a betrayer then and a liar? Just on guns, Police se souvient says that the bill is so bad the Prime Minister won't be invited to this year's memorial in December in Montreal.
Yeah.
What's your sense of their take?
Is it wrong? I disagree with a whole number of things they've said about the bill. I mean, the reality of actually...
Sorry, that I've said or that Police se souvient said?
That they've said.
Okay.
Right? First off, the issue around closing the loopholes that manufacturers have right now and importers, this is a significant thing, because we've had this problem for years, and the reason why we keep coming up with new lists is because this massive loophole you can drive a truck through continues to exist. So cracking down on manufacturers and importers that a number of groups that are concerned about firearms have raised is vitally important, ensuring ghost guns as well. And the reality is that putting the technical definition in that does block military-style assault weapons from coming forward into this country, blocking them before they come in, makes, to my mind, a lot more sense than trying to close the door each time after they come in.
But none of that applies to current guns, right? It's the same questions we had for you yesterday.
This is an issue that can only be handled, really, by ensuring that we're blocking new arms from coming into Canada, new military-style assault weapons, and at the same time setting up that committee that includes the consultation that didn't happen in the last go-around. Indigenous people, farmers, hunters, all of those folks is vitally important to actually ensuring that the classification takes place is no longer being done by the companies themselves, by the manufacturers.
But essentially,
and by the
it seems that you're.
It
seems that the NDP don't want to be in a position to be taking away guns that are currently in people's houses. That seems to be it. That you don't want to be in a position, which you were looking at in December, that you don't want any removed.
The Firearms Advisory Committee is set up to review that classification. That's very important. So we're blocking future military-style assault weapons from coming into Canada, and at the same time putting in place a consultative process that didn't exist last fall. And you'll recall one of the reasons why the amendments blew up was because there wasn't adequate consultation. That needs to change, and that's why we pushed for the Firearms Advisory Committee to be set up again. But I must go to QP. Désolé. Merci.
Julien estime que les libéraux ont dilué leur interdiction des armes d'assaut pour plaire à votre parti. Ils disent se sentir autant trahis par les NPD que par les libéraux. Qu'est-ce que vous leur répondez?
Je trouve ça extrêmement dommage qu'ils aient cette impression-là. Nous, au NPD, on est fiers d'avoir fait des avancées qui sont extrêmement importantes. Au lieu de se fier sur une liste qui deviendrait obsolète très rapidement, on a une définition qui va servir à faire en sorte qu'on va tarir le problème à la source. C'est-à-dire que les armes dangereuses, les armes des fusils d'assaut, n'arriveront pas sur le marché. Un peu comme si Santé Canada faisait en sorte d'interdire un médicament, il ne se retrouvera pas sur les tablettes. Donc les clients, les consommateurs ne pourront pas l'acheter. Alors, je pense que c'est une approche qui nous fait avancer énormément pour la sécurité de nos communautés, puis pour le meilleur contrôle des armes à feu. D'ailleurs, ça a été souligné et salué par la Coalition sur le contrôle des armes à feu.
Mais la définition, elle interdit seulement la nouvelle définition va seulement interdire les futures armes et non les armes actuelles. Pourquoi avoir fait ce choix-là?
Bien, les armes actuelles, il y en a déjà une liste de 2000 qui sont interdites. Cette liste-là demeure. Il y a un comité de surveillance qui va être mis sur pied, qui va mettre cette liste-là à jour également. Alors, pour nous, ce qui est important, c'est de protéger les droits des Autochtones puis des Premières Nations, ou également de ne pas s'attaquer aux chasseurs, mais de faire en sorte que pour retirer le plus possible ces armes-là, bien, il y en a qui sont interdites. Puis pour l'avenir, on met le fardeau sur le fabricant et non pas le consommateur. Et ça, je pense que c'est une approche qui est saluée par plusieurs, dont la Coalition sur le contrôle des armes à feu.
Were you briefed on it? I'm just confused at this point. Were you ever briefed on this?
Look, as I just said in the House of Commons repeatedly, that the decisions around what information is released that touch on national security and that, if released, could be injurious to national security or Canadian interests are made by the independent public servants that work within that sector. More specifically on this issue, we have reached out directly to Mr. Chong so that we can provide him with the information that we are able to in a secure environment, and for good reason. There are laws that govern this area, and we've been through this now for some period of time. So matters that relate to critical facts can't just be released carelessly or without thought to the Security of Information Act. I have an obligation to abide by those laws. Everybody who is sworn into these responsibilities does. So,
but we're looking at something from 2 years ago. Did the system,
understand that?
Did the system work as it should? That CSIS, someone made a decision, it appears, to not inform Mr. Chong about threats to him or threats to his family. Did the system work as it should when an MP said, I had no idea that my family was facing these kind of threats?
Well, I just first want to address one of the premises of your question, and that is that the passage of time does not in any way erode the obligations that I swear to in this ministry, or that members of government do, or frankly any member of Parliament who is sworn to secrecy around matters that touch on national security. So it could be 2 years, it could be 10 years, it could be 30 years. Those obligations remain with us until we die. On the other hand, I am confident that we are putting in place the measures that are necessary to protect parliamentarians, but candidly speaking, we have to be vigilant that the threat landscape is becoming more complex. There are hostile actors, whether we're talking about PRC or Russia or Iran or North Korea. Canada has an obligation to be very vigilant when it comes to making sure that we're protecting parliamentarians and the people that work in our democratic institutions. I do have to run, but I'll come back to you. Thanks.
But what's the next step, though? If your negotiation or if your motion passes with unanimous consent, we've seen a lot of NDP motions get unanimous consent and go nowhere. So what happens then?
Well, I think families, and certainly I support the families' call this morning. We need an immediate response and implementation of the red dress alert. That needs to happen immediately. The federal government needs to officially declare this a Canada-wide emergency in terms of the ongoing genocide against Indigenous women and girls. We need investment in shelters and other supports, and they need to immediately implement the 231 calls to justice. The Prime Minister has acknowledged what happened as a genocide. We've now seen the will of Parliament acknowledge what is happening in Canada as a Canada-wide crisis, and that needs an urgent response.
Public Safety Canada has said when it comes to alert systems, it's actually in the purview of provinces. It's not something they strictly operate. What do you make of that, and should the provinces be instituting something like a red dress alert?
Well, certainly it crosses jurisdictions, but that's actually not true. There are actually Indigenous communities that operate their own red dress alert. We're currently discussing what that will look like. I'm working with the minister to organize initial preliminary meetings with family members and advocates in the field to design what that system will look like, and we'll go from there.
Could I just ask you in practical terms? You've covered a lot of things in this material that you want to see from this motion today. What practical things do you want to see done at the Court of Portage and in riding and elsewhere?
Well, I've been really clear. I mean, and certainly the families today were really clear. We want to see the implementation of a guaranteed livable basic income in response to call for justice 4.5. That's certainly something that is pretty much unanimously supported by women's organizations from across the country. If we really want to tackle gender-based violence, we need more investments in housing and shelters. We need investment in supports to keep us alive. And one of those initiatives that can happen immediately, the system's already set up. We have weather alerts, we have Amber Alerts for children, is a red dress alert, and that needs to happen tomorrow.
So we're talking two separate things. Guaranteed income, that's a budget bill. But then there's the red dress alert, which is cell phones. So
well, that can
being practical. I'm just,
no.
I'm
Well, you know what? 100% that is practical, and certainly we have the system set up for a red dress alert. There's no reason why that can't happen tomorrow. It just takes political will. You know, if there's political will, then it can happen tomorrow. Certainly, the government has moved on other matters quickly, and they need to do that to save the lives of Indigenous women, girls, trans women, gender non-conforming individuals, two-spirit individuals.
Are you surprised that there was unanimous consent given to this? Because it was only a couple years ago where there wasn't one for one of your motions on residential schools in genocide. Are you surprised?
Well, the truth is the truth. We have a history in Canada. I'm very pleased today that all members of Parliament are acknowledging the truth about the history in this country as a way to move forward. Certainly, my motion passing on October 27, 2022, recognizing what happened in residential schools as an act of genocide under the UN Convention, genocide was a start. This is another step. You know, it's been acknowledged. Now they have to act on it. It's one thing to acknowledge truth. It's another thing to act on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Minister. Can I ask you, as Minister of Heritage, Gordon Lightfoot is passed.
Yeah.
I mean, you exist in the background, but
No.
What songs of his actually jumped across the river for you?
Sundown. Sundown, Mother, and the other one that he wrote after his separation. If you can read my mind, love. And I used to play those songs on the guitar. I loved his voice. I love the way he played the guitar. The fact that he played so often on a 12-string that I do also. He was amazing. The way he told stories about us, you know, Canadians. Yeah, he was a great artist.
You were just humming, if you could read my mind.
Yeah, I can't sing.
You can't get.
I'm not good. I can play on the guitar, but I can't sing.
Okay. Cool. Is there anything I missed there? Or?
Sorry?
Is there anything else on Mr. Lightfoot that I missed? Or?
No, he had an amazing life, amazing career. He made us smile, made us cry sometimes with his song. Always made us think and always made us proud as Canadians. Thank you.
Good to see you. I know you love music. I know you are appreciative of music. Do you have a favorite Gordon Lightfoot song? And if so, what?
I'm going to say Canadian Railroad Trilogy. It was on an album that one of my older brothers had, so I listened to a lot of Lightfoot. But Sundown and the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald were pretty close to.
Any other moments of songwriting or Canadiana that he evokes to you?
Well, just the inspiration that he, you know, that so Gordon Lightfoot, Joni Mitchell, and then Neil Young. They really set the pace, I think, for Canadian music. You know, Guess Who was around at that point too, but no, he was just an inspiration. He really was, and he wrote about. He didn't write uniquely about Canadian themes, but the Canadian themes he wrote about, he did very well.
You know, you're a punk guy, but I understand that you're a Lightfoot fan too. What can you tell me?
I think to really look at Lightfoot, it's not that he was a star, that he had this sort of, you know, pop star charisma. It's in the songs. It's the image, the mood he creates, the Tin Pan Alley hooks. And look at who covered him. Bob Dylan, Elvis, Neil Young, Billy Bragg. Everybody's covered Lightfoot because there's nothing that matches the power of those songs.
When you pick up the guitar, as you often do, is there a Lightfoot song that you worked through just as to marvel at or to enjoy or to perform yourself?
Well, I think his greatest piece is still the Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. But living in a little town up in northern Ontario, we live in a house on a hill by a worn-down, weathered old mill, in the valley below where the river winds, and there's no such thing as bad times. Lightfoot wrote us an anthem for our family. He's written anthems for everybody.
I apologize, that one I don't know the title to. I know my Gordon School Volume 1 up and down.
Cotton Jenny.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, but that was, again, Anne Murray, another. Everybody did his covers.
Oh, Cotton Jenny, her name, she drives me up when she...
There's a house on a hill by a worn-down, weathered old mill in the valley below where the river winds.
Great musician. One of the things that I, as someone who plays the acoustic guitar, I shared last night is a version of one of Gordon Lightfoot's songs. If you could read my mind, is because it's one of the classics in Canada. I remember loving to play that as a musician. It's one of his music, I think, spans coast to coast to coast. I think his loss is a very sad loss, but it gives us a chance to reflect on what he did for music in Canada and what he's done for our country.
Is there any little tricks in his songwriting that you marvel at while you're trying to get through a chord and you're like, he did that to me?
Yeah, but also his ability to handpick with the fingers and the picking. If you take a look at trying to play, if you could read my mind, it's a lot of finger picking. It's a lot of a different action that is difficult. It's a high level of complexities to try to replicate his music. In the Early Morning Rain is a beautiful thing where there's all kinds of chord transition. As a person who's a musician, who's a recording artist, you marvel at things like that. But also there's just the songwriting quality overall. You think about how it's a little bit of poetry, it's a little bit of lyrics, but it's always about Canada, and it really makes it resonate with people's heart and makes people understand what it means to be Canadian and what it means to live in this country. Beautifully done with his music.
The last question I got for you is, are you doing this all on a 12-string or a 6-string?
Oh, a 6-string. 6-string Gibson J45 is what I use, but I've never been good enough to get away with a 12-string.
Peut-être, premièrement, une réaction par rapport à ça. Est-ce que vous auriez aimé qu'on dépose plutôt un projet de loi?
Écoutez, on a besoin quand même d'avoir des critères, on a besoin d'entendre les communautés, on a besoin d'entendre, c'est pas juste l'Université de Sudbury, il y a quand même des problèmes avec les institutions à travers le pays. Alors, je pense que c'est une bonne idée de commencer à regarder spécifique les critères. Puis je pense qu'on va continuer à faire certain qu'on a notre part d'argent, surtout maintenant avec la région de Sudbury comme telle. Non, c'est bon, c'est bon.
Mais pourquoi ne pas avoir... Il a déposé un projet de loi, Mme Monson a déposé un projet de loi aussi. Pourquoi pas avoir pris le meilleur d'un peu de tout?
Oui, mais c'est un peu différent, là, ce qu'on a proposé ici avec les consultations aussi. Là. Alors, je pense que on a quand même ce travail qu'on fait comme CEDA avec les ministres, avec le ministre Freeland aussi, le budget, on regarde les ententes. Alors, il y a quand même des différentes choses qui rentrent en jeu ici. Là. On regarde plus comment on peut épanouir les institutions. On regarde comment on peut aller de l'avant aussi.
C'est quelque chose d'avoir entendu beaucoup peut-être légiférer sur le projet.
Oui, certainement. Je veux dire, l'Université Laurentienne qui utilisait la LAC, c'était un exercice médiatique, un cauchemar. Alors, eux autres ont pris la décision d'aller en LAC. C'était leur décision, mais c'est même encore aujourd'hui, il y a encore beaucoup de négatifs. Alors, une autre institution qui veut prendre ces démarches-là, je pense qu'il devrait y penser deux fois, parce qu'il y a quand même des répercussions à long terme en allant avec la LAC, ici, avec le processus, comme de l'ancienne d'ailleurs. Alors là, il faut trouver des façons de promouvoir, de trouver le positif. La Ville de Sudbury, avec le nouveau maire, travaille fort pour essayer de voir comment on peut trouver des façons de regarder le positif avec l'ancienne, parce qu'ils sont pris quand même avec la négativité qui s'est produite avec la LAC.
Merci. Juste avoir une réaction par rapport à ça. Est-ce que vous auriez peut-être aimé qu'on mette une loi ou penser que les consultations, c'est la bonne méthode?
Bien, c'est très important, le projet de loi de la sénatrice Montion. Évidemment, c'est arrivé à Sudbury, dans ma circonscription. Ceci, ça va aider à avancer le projet de loi maintenant qui est dans le Sénat.
Vous êtes confiante qu'on va arriver avec un projet de loi au bout de la ligne là, qui va interdire un 2.0 Laurentien?
Bien, moi, je travaille de très près avec la sénatrice et aussi avec le ministre Champagne. Et le ministre a dit qu'il veut vraiment nous aider et on veut s'achever avec le projet de loi.
Okay. Merci beaucoup.